And that's a great way to introduce Dato Sri Nazir to the stage to so 54.8% and of on-budget items. Another, I guess, if you include the off-budget items, it's 68, coming up to about 69, 70% of GDP for our things. And Nazir's concern always has been a little bit around the rounds of like the expenditure. It's not so much about the other things, it's just the expenditure management, right? And we in business, you've been in Shell and so on, we know about what that means, right? How is the government addressing that expenditure management? I think that's what, a lot of the press that comes out recently after the budget is all about, they're not concerned about the revenue accretiveness and all that, they're more concerned about the expenditure side.
In the government, we look at how other countries manage their economy, their finances. So you see around the world, various countries taking different stands. You find some countries, the government debt is already at 190% of their GDP. Japan stands there. That's very extreme. There are many countries that did 100% government debt as a relative to the GDP. Singapore is 100% actually government debt.
Yeah.
And
but
then
that's because they're trying. That's for different reasons. They're trying to create a bond market.
Yeah. So some other countries are at different levels. Then you take the other point. So that's one spectrum. The other one is to the ability to pay the loans. So if you borrow money, if you can pay it, it's okay. If you cannot pay, you get into trouble. This is called either your fiscal surplus or deficit. So many countries suffer from very high fiscal deficit. So what Malaysia is trying to do is, if you take the approach where they did in the UK, go for austerity drive. David Cameron said, I think they went for austerity drive. But the effect of that was they had a contraction in the economy. But we didn't really want to do the two, because we want to have a budget that drives growth, mildly expansionary, but not overly expansionary, but then make sure that we find a way to trigger a gradual reduction in our fiscal deficit, steady reduction in fiscal deficit, but to make sure that we put the right signals there. So essentially, we still want growth, but we want more of that growth coming out from the private sector. You notice in the budget, there's an increase in the private sector investment. In the way we see it, the forecast for 2014, there is actually a reduction in the development expenditure for the government. So the government investment is a reduction, I think 2.7% reduction compared to this year, which is a 5.5 increase in government expenditure. So a reduction in the DE expenditure is signaling the fact that we're finding ways and means to make sure that the private sector put more of the investment inside there and less of the government. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we achieve our fiscal deficit reduction. This year, we feel very confident that we will achieve our target of reducing it to 4%. Last year, we brought it down to 4.5%. And this year, we expect it to come down to 4%. When we first started, our Prime Minister, he took out when he became the Prime Minister, our fiscal deficit stood at 6.6% of GDP. In the second year of him being the Finance Minister and also Prime Minister, we brought it down to 5.6%, Malek. And then the third year was 4.8%. And last year, we brought it down to 4.5%. And this year, we expect to bring it down to 4%. And we feel confident that we will do that. And next year, we'll bring it further down to 3.5%. So our approach is a very balanced one. And I kind of feel happy that we have a very good budget that ensures that we continue to grow, but making sure that it is fiscally prudent.
I think the urban population, I guess, is asking for us to be more, and also in line with what Nazir said, to be more aggressive in terms of expenditure management. Not aggressive in terms of but really sort of trying to, I think the fundamentally is they want to reduce leakages, they want to reduce wastage, which you see in the Auditor General's report. I think that the sentiment is that here we are, working hard for our money, paying our taxes. We like to have a government that really is aggressive on these things and treat our money like their money, right? I mean, like their own. So how would you respond to that fact that we want more aggressiveness?
First of all, I agree with you. I agree with Nazir too, that we have to find a way how to reduce our expenditure when it's unnecessary. So our approach is very simple, to make sure that we look at what really matters. When we came with the government transformation program, we first asked the question, what are the things that the public say are very, very important agenda? They were 6+1 at the time. Dealing with corruption, dealing with crime, rural infrastructure, urban public transport, low-income household, education, and cost of living. These were the 7 ones. What it means is that spending money in those areas was what the public really wanted to focus on, but then do somewhat less in other non-focus areas. But of course, government is very tough. So if you go and talk at the federal level, you have a view. You go down at the state level, they also have views at the state level. So actually, go down at the local council level. Petaling Jaya, they have requirements in PJ. Shah Alam, they have requirements in PJ. In Kuching, they have requirements. So it's a very tough thing. As listen to Nazir here, I kind of miss the private sector actually, because it's a lot simpler in the private sector. I worked in Shell for 23 years. Yeah? I was working in Shell International. I kind of miss your kind of work. But I left Shell nearly 8 years ago. But when I asked the question, what in your conversation you had with Malek really got me excited when I sat quietly in the chair there is that I realized despite the difficulties that you guys have, you can make the decisions about moving forward. In government, you have to make decisions on what the public really wants. And then you're going to ask people, public is special publics. I talk about at the state level, different interests, different requirements. At local council, it's very different requirements. At the federal, very different requirements. So it's very tough to do. That said, we have formed in the fiscal committee that looks at this. We've also begun to examine what are the ways in which we will reduce the expenditure when it's not so necessary, not so important. Value management is put in place there. And we have made sure, I think we're the only country in the world that put such a thick Auditor General report in Parliament. You know, I asked Nazir, for example, in the corporate world, you guys are corporate sector people, all companies, including Shell, you have quarterly audit reports that go into all the microscopic detail. Those things, you guys do not put them at your shareholders meeting, your AGM. They are all by the audit committee. Or quarterly, you go through very thick document. But in Malaysia and the government, we don't put them in our internal discussion. We put the entire annual AGM, the whole document, you know, including microscope, how much this one costs. So we should put like that. So if you were to put all companies that put their quarterly audit report and put it your annual general meeting, wow, you have a tremendous discussion that is going on. So essentially in Malaysia, we made it so explicit, not only once a year under our GTP, because I agree with you, we want to put a lot more focus on it. The Prime Minister has agreed that we will make sure that the Auditor General report is split into components so that they will be discussed at every parliamentary sitting. At every parliamentary sitting. It means that we'll have to focus on them. The Auditor General will now have a dashboard. They will create a dashboard on which items have been ticked off in terms of implementation, which is now being closed. We've also charged the Chief Secretary, which is Tan Sri Ali Hamzah, to head the team to make sure that we take action against civil servants who did not go and execute their work according to proper standard operating procedures. If there are anyone found to be negligent, if they're found to have done something that is against the laws of the country, they should be taken to task. And so we're taking it very seriously. And those are some of the measures that are being taken.
Nazir?
No, I just wanted to mention that, you know, taking a leaf from the private sector, I always think that sometimes, you know, we went in 2008, we had, because of the financial environment, we had to do spend management, cutbacks. And I think the leadership by example is very important, you know. For your reference, during that period, you know, everybody, including the group CEO, travel economy class. Yeah, it doesn't save a lot of money. It's damn irritating, you know, to some extent. Because, you know, those are the perks of being CEO of a bank. But, you know, you give it up, not really to save money, but to send the signal down the line. Yeah, that everybody can see, okay, austerity starts at the top. Yeah. So maybe some of that signaling will be very useful. Hey, don't tell I said that.
That's exactly what I will say.
I think we can start with the outriders, right? We can just get rid of the outriders. That
Give a helmet,
yeah.
is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. We hate those outriders. Actually, there's a very good signal, just a tip. Anyway. Now, you're a happy economist that's perversely excited, fantastic, really happy about the thing. What kind, if you were to say, what would in his mind be a really sort of, he was happy with this budget, but does he see room for more aggressive budget deficit targets?
No, I think he thinks that he's okay with the targets, etc. But I think what he's signaling is that he's signaling that we have to, as I said, there's not much headroom.
So one downturn in the economy.
Yeah, and this,
black
and
swan.
we're very obsessed about the ratings.
Yeah.
And let's be very clear here, because that's a slippery slope. Yeah, and the rating agencies are sheep, right? That one does, the other one will follow, and then who can downgrade faster? It's a whole game. Yeah, so we cannot go down that path. So we need to make sure that we keep. I mean, I agree with Idris. You can argue to Kingdom Come whether 55% is the right number or not. But that argument seems to have taken place. We have imposed that debt ceiling. Yeah. So we should adhere to it. We've told the rating agencies we're going to adhere to it. So as I said, at 54.8%, we better make sure that we stick to it. And that's why, whatever we can do in terms of improving spend management, we must do.
Yeah. I've also been hearing in banking circles, actually 2 data points, that there is actually, because there's a worry, and in fact, banks, these 2 banks are actually saying we're reducing our exposure to government debt, Malaysian government debt. There are lots of contingent liabilities, obligations. Are you worried about Malaysian government debt? I mean, if you were to ask,
the government just print. No. Why do you worry about sovereign debt in ringgit? Now you ask me to buy Malaysia government USD paper, then maybe you got to make sure it's priced right, etc., etc. But ringgit debt, no.
Okay, all right. In terms of, I guess, the targets, now GST. Let's talk about GST. It's meant to be revenue accretive, although revenue neutral perhaps slightly in the beginning. So is this, what are the things that, that mitigate the fact that, all of us will be, from top to bottom, be paying our 6%? What are the elements to mitigate, I guess, as you say, one of your key areas is cost of living. That's almost like an immediate, simple math, whatever it is, but roughly 6% also in terms of a hit to cost of living. What is government doing to mitigate that aspect?
Well, the good news is that the 160 countries have already implemented GST. Yeah? And these 160 countries, they're all sorts, high-income economies, middle income, even low income. And of the 160 countries, the tools that exist that they have implemented to do mitigation and in GST, the first one is to identify items that should be 0 rated. That means there are no GST charged on those items. And most of the items that are essential, basic food items, transport, education, those kinds of things will be 0 rated. That means you don't just pay any GST. On top of that, because GST is a replacement tax, that means when it comes into force, we will get rid of the sales and services tax. You currently pay sales and services tax on those basic items. When we replace with GST, not only do we say there is 0 tax on it, we also don't charge you any more sales tax, because the sales tax is gone. So in fact, I think for those items that are listed as 0 rated, we actually benefit. The common man will benefit from it. So that's one of the tools that is available. The other one that is available in the tool for GST is items that are exempt. That means the tax is only available only for the input side of the cost, because it's claims and rebates is then available. This will help the competitiveness of many of our export items when you go overseas. Now, the other thing that is being done to mitigate it is to give a long lead time to prepare. We have given ourselves 17 months to prepare and to make sure that everything is there. The systems are there, retailers are there. We don't rush into doing it. And if we rush into doing it, we haven't prepared everyone to be ready for it. We've got 17 months until April 2015. We have time to prepare. Small retailers have to put the right point of sales material, educate people. 2 years ago, we already passed in Parliament the anti-profiteering law. So we've also have that in place now to make sure that people don't go and profiteer unnecessarily from just this. At the same time, we also have the anti-competition law that's already enforced in Malaysia. So I think there are a lot of mitigation factors from legal, from enforcement, from tools that's available, from the lessons learned from 160 countries. I have a feeling today, I really like the budget. I think Malaysia should have a budget like this every year. And we should have a budget like this, a very balanced budget, allow us to grow, fiscally prudent, and put the right priorities and where it matters.
I think you were advocating that for a long time already, and for the first time political will came about. Nazir, if I were to say to you, your CFO came to you in, you had a CFO whose track record as follows. He missed expenditure targets by 180 million ringgit last year. He missed expenditure targets, meaning the cap on expenditure, right? Targets, he was over budget by 150 million the year before. And, 3 years before, he was off by 130 million. What would you say to that CFO? And I'm relating this to the budget. I think that, because I think I'm trying to relate the idea of that basically the government actually said they will spend so much, but they missed the target by 18 billion, 15 billion, and 13 billion. What would you say to that CFO?
No, I think you need to deep dive into the details. I'm not a person who's fixed on expenditure targets and come what may. And the environment changes. Today, and I'm not a big fan of annual budgeting, by the way, because the environment changes so fast. So you can't just stick with what you decided a year ago and say, come what may, you must keep to that. Yeah. So we need to go into the details. Why exactly the additional spend was required? What value does it provide? So that's the kind of detail I would go in. When I get into those details, and I don't like what I hear, I would fire him. Yeah, but I wouldn't fire him just because of the headline.
Okay. And what are those details?
Let me start. You're now asking the right question. When you look at a country, an economy, you must define what's the measure for true north. There are 3 big measures that we put in under the economic transformation program. The first one is the measurement of the wealth of the economy. And we use the gross national income as the measure. That's key for us. We've said by the year 2020, one must meet the minimum requirement of $15,000 per capita by the year 2020. That's number 1 measure. And in the last 4 years, we actually grew our GNI per capita by 49%. If you do a linear projection, and we can actually achieve our $15,000 per capita earlier than 2020. And if you did the maths, you can get it by 2018. So don't hold me to it, but I'm just saying if you did the linear progression, because the world is not linear. Huh? Second one is about private investment. Time and again, we've said we must get the private investment to really push this. And for the first 10 years in the year 2010, Malek, that was our private investment grew on an annual rate of 6.7%. In 2011, we actually doubled that to 12.2%. Last year, we grew our private investment numbers to 22%. So that is very good. So the private investment is really pouring into the country and not at double and almost triple last year. The third one is about jobs. We've said by the year 2020, we need to create 3.3 million jobs. And that means if you do the maths, in 10 years, 330,000 jobs. Last year alone, the total employment numbers were created was 437,000, which we are ahead of the target. So as far as we're concerned, those are numbers, key headlines to measure the prosperity going forward. Now, look at government expenditure. You do want to get that. To get those headlines, you need to grow the economy. You need to grow the economy. You don't want to contract the economy. If you contract the economy, you cannot have a GNI. So we did not like the approaches, some of the other countries that said, let's go for strict austerity drive. If you went out there to just go and really ruthlessly cut costs, you can bring down, but you then contract the economy. You don't get the GNI required. So therefore, it's needed to do that. But of course, when private sector want to invest, let's suppose Petronas have said that they will spend the money on Pengerang. But of course, it's Petronas who will say, if I spend the money investing on Pengerang, I want the government to give enough water. There's not enough water. You have to build a road. Utilities have to be built by government. So we have to invest our share. If the private sector come and invest, we got to put ours there. So there is a project in Sampurna, in the Dadan project. And so they want to build invest to put in what you call lobster farming, a big time in lobster farming. But we have to put in the basic infrastructure. So you cannot expect the private sector to do that. So we will have to put our bit. So I do like that fact. Now the point is this: the rating agencies have made two big pointers, and that's the one we got worried. Fitch came out and said we got to make sure that our subsidy rationalization continue. We've clearly signaled that out so clearly in the budget, that the subsidy rationalization is a program that will continue. In fact, we've already put a 20-cent increase before the budget. So we weren't just talking about, we've actually done it before the budget. So the signal wasn't just a signal in budget, but we actually done it indeed, 20-cent increase. Now, the second point that they've said was you must implement a broad-based tax structure, the GST, which we've now committed to. And so I think from that standpoint, and we feel very confident that our commitment to reduce our fiscal deficit is proven. 4 years running, we've done it. So I would say that if you look at the CFO, you look at the CFO and the CEO, which is the same person in this particular case.
Yeah, that's another question,
yeah.
right?
And so, but my point is this: if you look at the measures, we got the GNI target, we got the investment target, we got the job numbers. We were, for 4 years running, we were also running down our fiscal targets. What do you expect? By the way, Bloomberg has announced today that the Malaysia's competitiveness ranking for World Bank, Malaysia jumped from number 12 in the world to number 6. That's very good. And so when you look at it, to my mind, when the world is now seeing at Malaysia, you jump from number 12 to number 6. In fact, we beat UK. They were, and so we really, it's fantastic. As far as I'm concerned, the world is seeing Malaysia. We're removing a lot of barriers for businesses to flourish here. Investments are coming. The fact that investments are coming, as I said, last year we grew it to 22%, the growth of private investment. I'm not talking about public investment. And so, and of course, World Bank's ranking showed that we jumped from number 12 to number 6. It showed, I think the targets are all met. And of course, you can look at some other indices, but I think if you look at the key measures, I think Malaysia is on the right path.
All right. On that positive note, I'd like now perhaps to pass it to the floor. What I'll do is I'll start from the left side, and then I will go take one question this way, so I remind myself not to forget. Can you just mention your name and the organization you represent before you ask the question?
Good morning, Patrick Tay from PwC. This question is directed towards Dato Sri Nazir. In CIMB's role to be globalized, to be a regional player, what would you consider the, say, 3 key most important things? If in 10 years' time you were to achieve all your goals, what would be the 3 key things that you would have done?
Obviously, it's firstly with stakeholders. I think that over the long term, we need to make sure that we deliver on total shareholder return, which we calculate as dividend come stock price appreciation. But the important thing is over the long term. We don't want to, actually making a bank perform well in the short term is the easiest job in the world. You just lend money. And then by the time the loan defaults, you move on to a different job. Then secondly, I think that we want to really be seen as the ASEAN bank, right? So that as a franchise, customers in all countries really see us as that entity that went from a local Malaysian to an ASEAN bank, so much so that CIMB Niaga in Indonesia is seen as the local ASEAN bank, as it were. and would have delivered the customer value proposition of ultimate convenience to deal through ASEAN, wherever in ASEAN. I mean, today, for instance, if you're a CIMB customer in Singapore and Malaysia, our click system, you can actually see your money going from your KL account to your Singapore account and vice versa at the same time. Those kind of things really get me excited because I really feel that we're helping locals become more ASEAN, if you like. That's very important to me. And I guess thirdly also, we will want to be seen as a key player in the whole Asian century game. I want us to be seen as truly one of the more successful Asian companies, and again, having helped the flow of investment, trade between countries in Asia Pacific as a whole.
Gentlemen, good day.
Yeah. Your name, sir?
My name is Chong. In life, I play two roles. One as a group agency manager for unit trust, as a unit trust consultant. I have a questions for you. I like to embrace Asians when it's opening up. How do you think we should play? We should prepare for it. That is my first question. My second question is that I play a role as a father of two, and I'm also a chairman of a Parents and Teacher Associations in one of the Chinese school. In line with our education policies, how do you think we should prepare for ourselves when the Asians open up? Thank you.
I think I'll take. I think your first questions are pretty much answered earlier a little bit about sort of being, when you're going to ASEAN regionally and so on, being able to we have an advantage, right? A diversity, and we just need to understand people's. If we go to Thailand, we need to understand the Thai nature, etc. Can I focus the question on your second one? Which is the education side. You have two children, you're concerned about, how old are they? They're 9 and 4, they're going probably to a Chinese SRJC, right? And you're concerned about their education moving forward, right? Would you like, I guess that's the nature. And would you like, if you had an option of a good Kebangsaan school, just a national school, which is a good one, would you send your kids to that national school? You're open to all options, okay. So your question, I'll get Idris to answer your question about his concerns.
My two responses at the government level. As you know, we've launched a national education blueprint. It's a very big transformation program that's being launched for our education system, and so that is one of the things that's taken at the government level to go and do that. So many shifts inside the detailed work. Let me talk about the parental level. The parent level, what do you actually do? I was invited to a Dayak association. A lot of folks were in Sarawak recently. They asked me the question, 15 years of Dayak development, a lot of things has happened. There are good and bad that has happened. What about for the next 50 years? What should we do differently as parents? That was a question someone asked me. So my response to the person is actually this. If you look at 50-year time horizon, parents, to my mind, if I'm a father, I should spend a lot more time with my kid to make sure they do the homework. Really, honestly, every night, I think if you spend 4 hours every day with your kid to go and do the homework, I think it's a lot of difference can be made. When I remember the time I was a kid, I was very fortunate coming in from a small tribe in Barrio. At that time, we talked about 5,000 Kalabits. All Kalabits can put everyone in the zoo. But I was fortunate, my father was the teacher. He opened the school there. So he taught me in the classroom. When I get home, he spent the time sitting with me to do my homework. Every night. He did it with my brother, with my sister. And so that was it. To my mind, really, the system was the same as everyone, is the same thing. But really focusing on doing that, I think we got to spend a lot more time as parents with our kids, making sure if you can't put the time, put some tuition, but really spending the time. And I think if you do that, I always tell the Dayaks, the answer to poverty is education. answer to poverty is education, for forward going as well. So really, yes, at the government level, we will do in the blueprint, but at the parent, with your questions about parent, what you should do, I think every night you should spend 4 hours with your kid. Yeah. I ask you, do you spend 4 hours with your kid? The answer is no. So that's what you need to do.
But I think his question is probably along the lines of what institutional support that you would give. I mean, for example, basically, you want a good school, right? I mean, that's a fundamental thing. You'll do your 1 hour every night with a kid, but at the end of the day, when they go to school, you want them to learn something, right? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And then,
so
let me.
Yeah.
Does the national
curriculum
education blueprint
Yes.
will that solve problems?
Yes.
Will that
certainly.
solve our education problems?
The first, I think the good answer in response to, I mean, you want to know evidence of what we're doing. We had a look at English amongst our teachers, and we conclude that the command of English language is not as good as you would like to be amongst our teachers. So we have 70,000 English teachers, 70,000, and we got all of them to sit for the Cambridge English placement test. Okay? So we know who failed and who passed. A lot of them didn't quite make it. So what we've now done is we've taken all the ones who did not make it by name. We are putting them through evening classes and weekend classes organized by the British Council. We've taken this very seriously. And so every teacher who did not make it, they know their test results, and we've taken them individually. So the issue here is not philosophical discussion about it. You got to look at it at the individual teacher level. The other thing that we've learned under the program is this. In Stanford, they use a new method of teaching, which is bringing in using technology to do it. So the old method of doing it, Malek would have been say, if you're an English teacher, you're a geography teacher, if you're not very good in geography, then I teach you geography so that you become more proficient in geography, you can teach the kids. The Stanford approach is like this. No, I don't need to teach you your full proficiency in geography, but I then borrow the teaching methods that's being used by the best geography teacher. I then make it available to you, all the methods, the homework, and I teach you how to become a good facilitator. So the teaching method is actually teaching the teacher to become a good facilitator of the tool that was made by the super geography teacher. That is what they're doing in Stanford and other places. So that means if you find the best geography teacher available, you put in all of their modules, the teaching methods, into the computer, but you teach the other teachers elsewhere to then use that interactively with the kids. That's how we will then bring. So some of those things I'm giving examples of what we are envisaging under this. So quite a lot of that kind of work. That's why it's fundamental for us to improve broadband penetration in Malaysia. Because if you don't have broadband penetration in Malaysia, quite a number of the rural schools cannot participate in this kind of work. So that's why we're pushing that very hard. But the key today is to identify the master teachers. Who are the master teachers in geography, in history, in mathematics? Codify all their teaching methods and the toolkit, the methods that they use every single day, and put it and teach our teachers to become good facilitators, so that the kids can then do it. Because the old traditional method of teaching them to become proficient, it's such a long, drawn process. Remember, out of 1.4 million civil servants, 400,000 of those are teachers. So when you say you're going to improve, to train them, you go to train 400,000. And that's the kind of mammoth task that has to be taken at hand. As I said, we've begun with the 70,000. Other numbers of the one who made it publicly available already, 70% of them are not proficient. So the number is big. So 70% of the 70,000 didn't quite make the Cambridge placement test. So we are actually really doing what we're going to do. We've got the British Council to come with the modules to make sure that these guys are doing it. In 3 months, the test results are very positive. So this is the independent work that's being done with British Council. In 3 months, 65% of those teachers that have gone through the classes have actually now moved one band upwards. So we can see the improvements, but it's going to be tough. We got to do it. But by the way, in the program, please come to the government website. You will see all the descriptions of what we're going to do under the 11th shift. I just gave an example, 2 examples, but I mean, there are a lot more in there.